How did a failed medicinal tonic become the most recognized brand on Earth? How did a drink once made with cocaine become a global cultural icon? And what secrets still hide behind the world's most closely guarded recipe? This is the true history of Coca-Cola, the drink that conquered the world. Our story begins in the late 19th century, a time when America was changing faster than ever before. Cities were growing, science was booming, and a new fascination spread across the nation: chemistry, medicine, and the promise of miracle cures. In the heart of Atlanta lived a man named John Stith Pemberton, a pharmacist, a chemist, and a veteran of the American Civil War. Pemberton suffered from chronic pain, the result of a saber wound he received near the end of the war. Like many veterans of his generation, Pemberton was prescribed morphine. It dulled the pain, but soon became an addiction. An entire nation of wounded men was struggling with the same quiet battle. In those days, pharmacies were not just places to buy medicine, they were laboratories of experimentation. And Pemberton, ever the chemist, began searching for a cure to his own dependency. Something to energize the body and soothe the mind without the dangers of morphine. It was then he turned to two exotic ingredients: coca leaves, long used in South America to fight fatigue and heightened alertness, and cola nuts, seeds for Africa, rich in caffeine. Together, they became the foundation of something entirely new. In May 1886, inside his humble laboratory on Marietta Street, Pemberton mixed a dark caramel-colored syrup. He brought it to a local pharmacy, Jacob's Pharmacy, where the syrup was blended with carbonated water and sold for just 5 cents a glass. They called it Coca-Cola, a tonic for the brain and the nervous system, a drink that promised energy, clarity, and vitality. But at first, no one cared. In its entire first year, Coca-Cola sold an average of just 9 drinks a day. No one could have imagined that this failed failure would one day become a global empire. One of the most misunderstood parts of Coca-Cola's history is the role of cocaine. Yes, early Coca-Cola did contain traces of the substance, but in context, that was not unusual. At the time, cocaine was legal. It was viewed as a medicinal stimulant, not a narcotic. Doctors prescribed it, chemists used it, and in small doses it was seen as safe. Historians estimate that a glass of early Coca-Cola contained roughly 9 milligrams of cocaine, a mild dose for 19th century standards. Still, as public opinion began to shift in the early 20th century, Coca-Cola faced growing pressure to change. By 1903, the company removed cocaine entirely, keeping only a flavor extract made from decoconized coca leaves. But while the recipe was changing, another transformation was already underway, one that would turn Coca-Cola from a struggling local medicine into a national obsession. John Pemberton would not live long enough to see it happen. He was ill, burdened with debt, and selling off parts of his formula just to stay afloat. Among the buyers was a sharp, quietly ambitious businessman named Asa Griggs Candler. He saw something in Coca-Cola that others did not: a brand, not a medicine.
The distinctive Coca-Cola script appeared almost at the same time as the drink itself in 1886. It was not created by a professional designer, but by John Pemberton's bookkeeper and business partner, Frank Mason Robinson, who had a talent for calligraphy. It was Robinson who suggested the name Coca-Cola and wrote it in a flowing cursive using the Spencerian style of business handwriting that was popular in the United States in the late 19th century. This handwritten version quickly began to appear in the first newspaper ads and on shop signs, and under Asa Candler, it was standardized and legally protected as a trademark, with official registration in 1893. Since then, the shape of the letters has hardly changed. The logo has been slightly refined, framed, placed on a red background, and paired with the famous white dynamic ribbon, but the core calligraphic word mark remains essentially the one Robinson drew in the 1880s. Candler was a marketing genius. He didn't just talk about the drink. He filled the world around people with it. He promoted Coca-Cola aggressively. He handed out handwritten coupons for a free glass of Coca-Cola, printed them in newspapers, and mailed them to homes, so that in the first decades, millions of free servings were given away. He offered pharmacies the first barrel of syrup for free, removing their risk and making customers themselves ask for the new drink. He distributed millions of coupons and turned a single trial sip into a habit. He invested heavily in branded advertising, calendars, clocks, fans, wall paintings, and signs on building facades. The company's name appeared on almost anything that could end up in front of a customer's eyes. By 1895, Coca-Cola was sold in every U.S. state. And in 1899, Candler licensed bottling rights to independent bottlers, a decision that transformed Coca-Cola from a fountain drink into a national and eventually global product. One of Coca-Cola's greatest achievements was not the drink itself, but the story around it. The company carefully cultivated myths that only 2 people know the formula, that it is locked in a vault, that it never changed. In reality, the formula has been documented. Multiple executives and chemists had access, and minor adjustments were made over time. Still, the myth worked. In 1915, facing many imitators and copycats, Coca-Cola held a contest to design a distinctive bottle that could be recognized even in the dark. The result was the famous contour bottle, inspired by the shape of a cocoa pod. Registered in 1915 and introduced widely in 1916, it became an icon in its own right and helped consumers distinguish the real thing from all the clones. By the end of the 19th century, the company was gradually locking in red as its main color. One practical explanation is that barrels of Coca-Cola syrup were marked with bright red paint to distinguish them from alcohol and other products in warehouses and railcars. Over time, that red marking evolved into a visual code for the brand, used on signs, posters, labels, and even on the clothing of soda fountain workers. As Coca-Cola built its own fleet of trucks and cooling equipment, the visual identity literally moved out into the streets. Early delivery trucks were painted entirely in red, with large white logos on the sides, and sometimes an illustration of the iconic bottle, so that each vehicle acted as a moving billboard. In 1925, the written formula was placed in a bank vault in Atlanta, reinforcing the legend of secrecy. Decades later, it was moved to a high-security display at the World of Coca-Cola Museum, turning a business document into part of the brand's mythology. World War II transformed Coca-Cola into a global symbol. In 1941, Coca-Cola President Robert Woodruff made a bold promise. Every man in uniform gets a bottle of Coca-Cola for 5 cents, wherever he is, whatever it costs. To fulfill this promise, Coca-Cola built more than 60 bottling plants near military bases across Europe, North Africa, and the Pacific. The company followed U.S. troops around the world, creating supply chains in places where the drink had never been seen before. For soldiers far from home, an ice-cold Coke tasted like America. By the end of the war, Coca-Cola was no longer just an American drink, it was an international one. In 1950, Coca-Cola became the first commercial product ever featured on the cover of Time magazine, a sign that a simple soft drink had become a global cultural force. During the 1950s and 1960s, Coca-Cola perfected emotional advertising. It didn't just sell taste, it sold happiness, youth, freedom, togetherness. Its Christmas campaigns helped cement the modern popular image of Santa Claus, not invent it from zero, but strongly reinforce it. The red suit, the white beard, the warm, cheerful smile. Coca-Cola's holiday ads, especially the famous illustrations by Haddon Sundblom starting in the 1930s, fixed this version of Santa in the public imagination. At the same time, Coca-Cola was expanding beyond cola. In 1960, the company acquired Minute Maid, marking a major step into juices and non-carbonated drinks, and signaling that Coke wanted to be a total beverage company, not just a single soda. In 1971, the company released one of the most famous commercials ever made.
"I'd like to buy the world a Coke." It showed young people from different nations standing together on a hill, singing in harmony. Coca-Cola has never been the only player in the game or a completely safe, dominant force. From the very beginning, it had to fight off a crowd of rivals. Across the United States, dozens of other cola drinks and hundreds of tonics tried to copy its success, from small regional brands to ambitious national ones. But one competitor stood out above all others. In the second half of the 20th century, it turned the soft drink market into a battlefield of brand warfare. It was not a spin-off of Coca-Cola, but another pharmacy experiment that grew into a separate empire, Pepsi-Cola. In the second half of the 20th century, the rivalry between Coca-Cola and Pepsi turned from ordinary competition into a full-scale cola war. Pepsi made the first bold move. In the 1960s, it launched the Pepsi Generation campaign and started selling not just the taste of the drink, but a lifestyle. The ads showed young people, active, modern, and Pepsi positioned itself as the choice of a new generation in contrast to the more traditional, family image of Coca-Cola. In 1975, the famous Pepsi Challenge appeared. In streets and shopping malls, tables were set up with two identical, unmarked cups, and people were asked to choose in a blind test which drink they liked more. In many of these tests, participants picked Pepsi more often. Its sweeter taste tended to win in a quick sip. But the pressure kept growing, and by the mid-1980s, the company decided to play by Pepsi's rules. It changed the formula to a sweeter one and launched New Coke. That decision became the climax of the Cola Wars and at the same time the biggest mistake in the brand's history. Longtime fans saw the new taste as a betrayal, and Pepsi got a powerful information boost for another wave of advertising. In the end, Coca-Cola returned to its classic formula, and analysts drew an important conclusion. In brand wars depends not only on taste and not only on advertising, but also on the deep emotional bond people have with a product they've been drinking for years.
Coca-Cola had underestimated how emotionally attached people were to the original taste. After just 79 days, the company reversed the decision and reintroduced the original formula as Coca-Cola Classic. By the late 20th and early 21st century, public health concerns grew louder. A single can of Coca-Cola contains around 39 grams of sugar and essentially no nutritional value. As obesity and type 2 diabetes rates rose around the world, sugary soft drinks came under increasing scrutiny. Coca-Cola's global success has also created disturbing local extremes. One of the clearest examples is Mexico, especially the southern state of Chiapas. Mexico is among the world leaders in sugary soda consumption per person, and in Chiapas, many people are said to drink more cola than water. In some towns, clean drinking water is unreliable or more expensive, while bottles of soda are cheap, everywhere, and heavily advertised. Over time, cola has become part of everyday culture, on family tables, at celebrations, even at religious events. The result is serious health damage. Chiapas reports very high rates of obesity, diabetes, and tooth decay, and for many critics, the region has become a symbol of what happens when soda is easier to get than safe water. In 2015, journalists revealed that Coca-Cola had funded organizations such as the Global Energy Balance Network, which argued that lack of exercise, not diet, was the main cause of obesity. Critics said this downplayed the role of sugar and calories. The backlash was severe, and the organization was shut down within a year. Since then, Coca-Cola has expanded its zero-sugar products, invested in bottled water, tea, and low or no-calorie options, and publicly committed to reducing sugar across its portfolio. Critics argue that these moves came too late, and that the company still relies heavily on sugary drinks for profit. And yes, it still legally imports decocainized coca leaf extract through the Stepan Company under strict U.S. government supervision. No cocaine enters the drink, only flavor remains. Today, Coca-Cola operates in over 200 countries and territories,
with a portfolio of more than 500 brands. It owns or controls brands such as Coca-Cola, Sprite, Fanta, Dasani, Minute Maid, Costa Coffee, and Vitamin Water, among many others. Coca-Cola's business works very differently from what most people imagine. When you see a bottle of Coke in a store, it usually wasn't made by the Coca-Cola company itself. The global corporation sits at the top of the system. It owns the brands, the secret recipes, and produces the concentrate, the thick syrup that gives the drink its taste. Then come the bottlers. These are separate companies that buy the concentrate, mix it with water, sugar, or sweeteners, add carbonation, and bottle the final drink. They own the factories, the warehouses, the truck fleets, the coolers and shops, and they negotiate with supermarkets and restaurants. Each bottler has its own exclusive territory, a country or a group of countries, and is responsible for everything physical: production, logistics, and local marketing. Coca-Cola, therefore, earns most of its money not by selling finished bottles, but by selling concentrate and the right to use its brands. The margin on concentrate is very high, while the heavy capital costs and many of the risks sit with the bottlers. In many key regions, Coca-Cola also owns a significant stake in the major bottlers, which gives it influence without taking on all the operational burden.
The Coca-Cola brand was valued by Brand Finance in 2025 at around $46.3 billion, making it one of the most valuable brands in the world and the undisputed leader of the global beverage sector. It consistently ranks within the top 30 worldwide, remaining a symbol of cultural recognition and emotional connection.